Hello everybody, the croaky husk of Adam Clery here. You are watching 442 and I'm sure it's not escaped your attention, but it's the Carabao Cup Final this weekend. The most prestigious trophy in all of sport that happens to be sponsored by a Shan version of Red Bull. Alright, so first things first, okay, you put a loaded gun to my head and you ask me who I think's going to win this game. I will wet my pants and sob uncontrollably, ask who you are and why you're doing this, but eventually I will probably say Liverpool. However, if we look at two of their most recent fixtures, the 1-1 draw they got against Manchester City and the 4-1 hammering Liverpool gave them last time they met, there is a lot of stuff in there that suggests you shouldn't write them off. Now, come the actual final, we expect Chelsea to line up like this. I would say, in fact, the only question mark in this entire team is whether or not he goes with Raheem Sterling from the start or whether he considers him an option for later in the game. And if it is this exact 11, then it's unchanged from the Manchester City game, where I think it's fair to say Chelsea really did surprise a lot of people. They seemed to be well organised at the back, they were intense with their press, and they could very easily have gone and won that game just as easily as Man City could have. There was just something about Chelsea, specifically in the way that sort of Gallagher, Fernandes and Caicedo function as a unit, but obviously spread throughout the rest of the team, that felt like it was just finally clicking into place. But before that though, please step inside my time machine as we go all the way back to Chelsea 1, Liverpool 4, where they went to Anfield and got their pants pulled down. Now, as we discussed in a whole other video on the channel, which I hope I'm pointing out, otherwise I'm going to look really silly, Chelsea lost that game because they committed the cardinal sin of being stuck between two philosophies for playing against a really good attacking team. They held this incredibly high line against Liverpool, pushing their defenders up to the halfway line on occasion, which is fine, nothing wrong with that individually, but they were also being really passive in how they pressed their defenders and their midfielders. Or to put that another way, they were leaving loads of space in behind whilst simultaneously giving Liverpool loads of time on the ball in which to find it. And you just cannot do that, I'm afraid. Like, if you want to have a high line, you've got to press with a bit of intensity, and if you don't want to press with a bit of intensity, then you've got to sit deep. You can't get caught between those two ideas, because then Liverpool will absolutely smash you. And what we saw in that game is something we've seen from Chelsea quite a lot this season. Like, Conor Gallagher is probably one of the best pressing attacking midfielders in the league. Like, we brought his numbers up in our review of the Crystal Palace game, and they are absolutely extraordinary. But all this here, as good as it looks, is not what pressing is. That's just one man chasing a ball down. Pressing is when you have an organised structure to do it as a team with specific ways you're trying to turn the ball over. And as we saw several times, Conor Gallagher will do all the hard work and nobody really goes with him. Now, whether that's a lack of effort from his teammates or it is actually Chelsea's game plan just to let him do it on his own doesn't really matter. It just doesn't work. And so with no real pressure on the ball, Liverpool have a lot of players in their midfield and the defence who can pick a pass like I can pick my nose, and they kept getting in behind or around Chelsea almost for fun. So not unfairly, Chelsea went into that Manchester City game and people thought a similar thing is probably going to happen. They're going to give them too much time on the ball, City are going to play into that space, and they could absolutely do them. But they didn't. And in fact, in that City game, Chelsea were so much better off the ball. They were so good out of possession that Man City kept having to make little tactical tweaks all over the pitch to try and fix the problems they were causing. I'm just going to show you the average positions of the Chelsea side in that Manchester City game, because it's just so much better structured and more organised than we've seen them in a lot of big games this season. You can see there's a really good shape to their back four. Gusto obviously pushing on a little bit higher than Chilwell, but both of them able to get down the flanks when they're able, and Caicedo, for once, actually able to get involved in this sort of space between all four defenders. Enzo Fernandez, rather than getting pulled all the way up trying to be the main creative threat, is actually pretty close to Caicedo. He was deep, he got involved, he helped with the build-up, he helped with the pressure. Conor Gallagher, as well, is not getting pulled all over the place. He's actually much closer to Fernandes and Caicedo than he normally is. Sterling and Jackson are the two most attacking threats, both centrally and down the left, but the really interesting one here is Cole Palmer. Now, Cole Palmer on the right for Chelsea is very interesting because he very rarely stays on the right. Normally, what will happen is that Conor Gallagher will end up getting a bit closer to his two central midfielders and Palmer will fill into this number 10 position. Or alternatively, when Jackson will drop out into the flanks to receive the ball, Palmer will just go and play up front himself. But in this game, and I'll just put everybody back where they're supposed to be, this is Cole Palmer's heat map. Now, on the one hand, they are playing Manchester City, so you would expect him to drop off and probably be a little bit deeper, but he was having the bulk of his influence on this game from this almost sort of like classic right wing position. Not a forward in any sort of way, sort of a wide midfielder. Now, if we just look at this for a little second, right, okay, and then we compare it to Malo Gusto's heat map instead, you'll see it's not that City were forcing them back into their own half so much, because your right back was able to get up to this area of the pitch and start to influence the game. Look, he's even up here doing all sorts. This was a deliberate decision by Chelsea. Now, part of the reason for this is that Man City had that sort of 4 in the middle, which outnumbered Chelsea 3. So Palmer was the one who would drift across just to make sure that Kevin De Bruyne was never getting the amount of freedom that sort of numerical advantage should have given him. But more importantly, what it was doing was by dropping off, it was forcing Nathan Ake to sort of push up with him, creating this enormous amount of space in behind him for Gusto to then get into. And because Man City build up with that sort of 3-2-2 shape, it meant that Chelsea kept finding themselves with 4 players in this sort of area outnumbering Manchester City. The solution from a Man City perspective is that either Jeremy Doku has to track all the way back with Gusto to keep you a 4v4 there, or they have to coordinate between him and Ake, passing the other one off to each other. And a couple of times in the game, we kept seeing Palmer way deeper than the other attackers, getting on the ball and able to pick a pass in behind. But the thing is, this is mostly on the ball stuff, and I did just say the thing that Chelsea finally seemed to get right against Man City was their off-the-ball stuff. Now, I've just set Chelsea a little bit deeper here so you can see what I'm talking about. We'll overlay Manchester City in their build-up shape, their 3-box-3 system, and that is Akanji, Rodri, Alvarez, and De Bruyne as that square, that 4 players in the middle of the pitch. 4 players, crucially, you do not want to mess about with. Now, Chelsea actually set a pretty decent pressing trap here. Like, Nicholas Jackson would push onto Diaz, Sterling was on the other side by Kyle Walker, Gallagher would join in and press Nathan Ake, and then Palmer, sort of superfluous out on this side, would then just sort of drop into the middle to keep an eye on Rodri. Caicedo and Fernandes were sort of taking turns, alternating between De Bruyne and Alvarez, depending on what their movement was. But you'll notice here, this largely leaves Akanji free. Now, that theoretically is what Man City want you to do. You've committed 3 players to move on to their centre-back, leaving you with 3 versus 4 in the middle, so they get a spare man. But out of all the men here who could be spare men, Akanji is probably the one you'd be the most happy with. And if you've ever heard the term a pressing trap, this is what one is. Like, they've created a scenario where there's an easy ball into a player, but they want you to give it to that player. And when Akanji did receive the ball, usually with his back to Chelsea's goal, either Caicedo or Fernandes would then jump on him. And the thing is, neither of them have technically left their men because they've got them in what's known as shadow cover. Like, they're not touch tight anymore, but they're blocking the passing lane off to them, so they're pretty much marked out of the game. But why are you pointing that out, Adam? They're playing Liverpool at the weekend. Manuel Akanji doesn't play there, and without Alexander-Arnold, they're far less likely to go for this 4 versus 3 thing in the middle, and that's because it requires a level of intensity and coordination that Chelsea haven't recently had. Like, even without Trent Alexander-Arnold, Liverpool will be building up in this sort of 3-2 shape with sort of Endo and McAllister, you would imagine, in these 2 sitting positions. I imagine what they'll do with the defence is they'll keep rotating between which of the fullbacks is allowed to push all the way up and which one has to come across and tuck into a 3. Neither Bradley nor Robertson are great at that, but they can both do it. And while I would certainly argue that Endo and McAllister are much better at receiving the ball and getting turned and doing stuff with it than Manuel Akanji is, most of this basically just comes down to how intense can you be with it? How much do you want to close that distance? For the first time in ages, we saw both Caicedo and Fernandes really tenacious against Man City in trying to turn this ball over and to deny them time on the ball. But I will tell you something else that Chelsea did against Man City that they could definitely do to Liverpool and would be a nightmare for them. So one particularly brave thing Chelsea did against Man City was they formed their 3-2 using their goalkeeper. They split both their centre-backs incredibly wide, pushed the full-backs forward, and allowed Fernandes and Caicedo to sort of form this build-up structure. Now, the problem this caused for City is that Erling Haaland is not a pressing machine who's going to cover 3 separate players. So both the wingers, Doku and Foden, they then jumped onto the centre-backs, which meant that Chelsea kept finding themselves in a situation where both the full-backs were the free men. Now, Haaland, De Bruyne and Rodri match up Gallagher, Fernandes and Caicedo really well. They're all nicely marked, and Alvarez is kind of the floating player in case Nicholas Jackson drops away from the front line. Now, with Walker and Ake looking after Sterling and Palmer, the temptation for them becomes, well, we've got 2 centre-backs here, there's nothing really going on. Do we not just jump onto these 2 full-backs and stop them being free? And in that first half especially, they did do that. They pushed all the way up, leaving this space in the channel and sort of hoping that Diaz and Akanji would then just sort of look after the two wide players. But as we've already illustrated with his heat map, Cole Palmer wasn't playing up around here where the centre-backs could look after him. He was dropping really, really deep. And this just caused absolute bedlam with Man City, because either Gusto could now get in behind the full-back as he was retreating, or Jackson could drop wide into the space that had left, or Diaz had to go with Palmer into this kind of area, just leaving so much room for Chelsea's other attacking players to basically outnumber Akanji 2 or 3 to 1. Now, this would be harder to do against Liverpool because they've got Alvarez there who doesn't want to get drawn out all over the pitch chasing players around. He wants to be doing some attacking, and Liverpool will have either Endo or McAllister or Gravenberch, who are all a little bit more switched on in that regard, but it is still doable. Whether it's Bradley or it's Robertson, Liverpool absolutely will be leaving loads of space down the channel and in behind. And as Chelsea proved against Man City, they've now got 2 or 3 different options for how they like to exploit that. But more importantly though, the lesson they seem to have learned from the last time they played Liverpool is not to sit too high up while you're doing it, and not to half-arse your press at the same time. They showed against Manchester City that they are now capable of being compact and being hard to play through, while at the same time being coordinated enough in the middle and having the right energy levels to go and turn the ball over. And for all this stuff, all the systems, all the tactics, all the structures, all just this nerd stuff, the one thing that's going to matter is that if this works, can you stick it in the back of the net? And they really, I've got no stats to tell you how they're going to do it, but they do really need to do that. So yes, that's how I think this Chelsea team can win the Carabao Cup Final. Do I think they will win the Carabao Cup Final? Oh, mate. No, I never actually said that, obviously, but there is way more about them than I think they're being credit for. They're being written off way too easily. Anyway, if I haven't ruined this video because I don't know how to use my new microphone, then I hope you enjoyed it. Please do leave us a comment below and let us know who you think is going to win on Sunday. Not who could win, that's what this video was. Who will win? In the meantime, though, grab the latest issue of 442. I cannot get over still how beautiful that cover is. Lionel Messi, he's in that somewhere. You can grab me on Twitter, X, Instagram, anywhere you like, at Adam Clery, Clery. 442 socials are right there. And we're having a bumper month here on the channel. It's going incredibly well, so if you would consider subscribing to us, we might break a record. We nearly broke it last month, and we're on to do it even though it's a shorter month. So if you did like this and you think, hey, I might watch some more of that, button. Anyway, yes, I'm off to have like 3 strepsils for lunch now. I hope you're having a good day, and that's all I've got. That's goodbye. Goodbye. See you Sunday. Goodbye.